Evan Hale had spent many years walking through deserts, studying rocks, and mapping old riverbeds. But he had never seen anything like the sky on that evening. The sun had just slipped behind the sand dunes, leaving a warm orange glow over the quiet landscape. Evan was packing away his tools, ready to enjoy a peaceful night in his small tent, when something bright streaked across the sky. At first, he thought it was a falling star. Falling stars were rare, but not unheard of in the desert. But this one didn't disappear. Instead, it grew bigger. Much bigger. The glowing object moved too fast for an airplane, and too bright for anything he had ever observed. It left a long tail of silver light behind it, and the sand around Evan brightened, as if the sun had suddenly risen again. He stood there, frozen, unsure if he should run or duck. The object roared across the sky and then dipped downward sharply, heading straight toward the open desert miles away. As it neared the ground, the light pulsed once, twice, and then winked out. A moment later, a soft rumble reached Evan's ears. The sound was far away, but unmistakable. Something had landed, or crashed. Evan lowered his equipment bag slowly. His heart pounded with curiosity more than fear. He had always loved mysteries, hidden fossils, desert stories, old maps. But this was something new, something strange and exciting. He grabbed his flashlight, a water bottle, and a thin scarf to protect his face from blowing sand. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should stay where he was. The desert could be dangerous at night, and whatever fell from the sky might still be hot or unstable. But the curiosity tugged at him strongly. He simply had to know what had fallen. He walked in the direction of the crash, following the faint glow that still lingered on the horizon. The desert nights were cold, and each step sank into the soft sand, but Evan didn't slow down. As he crossed a ridge, he saw something that made him stop again. A shallow trench carved through the sand led toward a small valley, as if something had slid across the surface before coming to a stop. The trench was smooth and strangely even, as though made by a giant object skimming the desert floor. Evan followed the trench, letting his flashlight lead the way. The wind picked up a little, brushing grains of sand past his boots. After 20 minutes of walking, he reached the end of the trench, and there he saw it, a rounded metal object half buried in the sand. It was about the size of a car, but shaped like something he could not easily describe. It wasn't square or smooth like a vehicle. Instead, the metal curved like a polished shell, as though built to slip through air with ease. There were no markings, no symbols, nothing that looked man-made. The surface shimmered faintly with leftover heat. Evan's breath caught in his throat. He stepped closer, shining the flashlight along the object's body. Part of it had cracked open on the side. The edges of the opening were bent outward, not inward, and that detail bothered him. If the object had simply hit the ground, the metal should have been bent inward. But instead, the metal looked as though something inside had pushed its way out. He leaned forward slowly, staying cautious but unable to resist the need to know more. The opening was large enough for a person to crawl through. Evan shined the light inside. The interior glowed with a soft blue hue, probably from some still active source. Strange symbols blinked along the inner walls. They weren't like any language he recognized. And the inside was empty, completely empty. Evan stepped back. Whatever had been inside was now out here somewhere in the desert. A ripple of unease ran down his spine. The desert was silent, but the silence felt different now. Heavy, watchful. He aimed the flashlight around. That's when he saw the prints in the sand. Large, deep, and shaped like clawed paws, though they didn't match any animal he knew. A lion's paw print was big enough, yes, but this one was larger and longer. And the spacing between the prints suggested something tall, something powerful. The tracks led away from the strange pod and into a shallow dip between dunes. Evan followed them cautiously. He told himself he only wanted to make sure the creature, whatever it was not injured. His mind tried to stay calm by listing possibilities. Maybe it was some new type of equipment test gone wrong. Maybe it was art or a movie prop dropped from a plane. Maybe the tracks were distorted by the wind. But deep down, Evan knew he wasn't fooling himself. Everything about this felt too real, too unusual. He walked another 10 minutes before he spotted a shape lying partly hidden by the sand. For a moment, he thought it was a large desert cat, maybe a lion that had escaped from some private reserve. But as he got closer, he realized it wasn't a lion at all, only shared some features. The creature was tall, perhaps 7 feet if it stood upright. Golden fur covered its body, but not entirely. Its arms and legs were more human-like, though stronger and lined with faint, smooth stripes. The creature's face looked gentle, even while unconscious, with a mane-like crest of fur framing its features. It wore a faintly glowing band around one wrist, and its chest rose and fell slowly, showing that it was alive but weak. Evan knelt several feet away at first, trying to understand what he was looking at. He had seen many strange animals in his fieldwork, but never anything like this. He didn't feel threatened, only worried. The creature's breathing sounded uneven. The sand beneath it looked disturbed, as if it had struggled to stay upright before collapsing. The desert night was growing colder. If he left the creature out here, it might not last till morning. Evan looked at its large hands, the gentle slope of its shoulders, and the faint light of the wristband. Something about it made him believe it wasn't here to harm him. In fact, it looked more scared and injured than anything else. He took off his scarf and slowly approached. "I don't know if you can hear me," he whispered, "but I'm going to help you. I hope that's okay." He moved carefully, watching for any sign of waking. The creature did not stir. Its fur felt warm under his fingers, warmer than human skin, and its breathing steadied a little, as if sensing the support. Evan used all his strength to lift its upper body. The creature was heavier than it looked, but he managed to shift it enough to drag it gently across the sand. The walk back to his tent felt longer than the walk out, especially with the extra weight. Several times he had to stop and catch his breath, but he didn't give up. Something inside him, something he couldn't explain, told him he needed to help this creature. Leaving it behind would be wrong. By the time he reached the tent, his arms were shaking from effort. He laid the creature gently on the floor inside, placing a blanket over its body to keep it warm. The creature did not wake, but its breathing grew more steady, more peaceful. Evan sat beside it for a long while, listening to the soft desert wind outside and the calm rhythm of the creature's breath. The night felt different now, filled with mystery and a strange, quiet comfort. He watched the creature's face, wondering who or what it was, wondering why it had traveled through the sky in a glowing pod. He didn't know it yet. But the moment he chose to help her, his life had already changed forever. What he thought was only a single night of curiosity and kindness would become the beginning of the strongest bond he would ever experience. And though he could not understand her language or her world, he felt something warm settle inside his chest, feeling that this creature was important, that she had come into his life for a reason. He stayed awake long into the night, keeping watch over her until the stars faded and the first light of dawn painted the desert in soft gold. Evan had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty: nothing in his life would ever be ordinary again. Evan woke up to a soft, rhythmic sound, almost like a gentle purr mixed with slow breathing. For a moment he forgot where he was. The desert morning was cool, and the faint breeze pressed against the tent walls. Then he turned his head and remembered everything from the night before: the bright streak in the sky, the strange pod, and the golden-furred creature lying only a few feet away. The creature was still asleep, but the rise and fall of her chest was smoother than before. Her fur reflected the early sun that slipped in through a gap in the tent, making her look peaceful, almost glowing. Evan sat up carefully, rubbing his eyes. He didn't want to startle her. He also didn't want to rush the moment. For the first time in his life, he was sharing a tent with a being he didn't fully understand. Yet somehow he felt calm around her. He checked the water container and poured some into a small bowl, just in case she woke up thirsty. Then he gently wiped sand off her wristband, trying not to disturb her. The band was smooth and warm, covered in little lights that blinked slowly like stars. He didn't know what it meant, but he sensed it was important to her. A soft sound came from the creature, almost like a sleepy sigh. Her fingers flexed gently. Evan leaned a little closer but kept his distance so she wouldn't feel crowded. Her eyelids, lined with pale gold fur, fluttered. For a moment she stayed still. Then her eyes opened. They were bright, amber, deep and intelligent, with a calm curiosity that made Evan freeze. She looked around the tent slowly, her gaze settling on him. Evan raised his hand slightly, showing he meant no harm. "Hello?" he said softly. "You're safe." She blinked, her eyes focused on him, and she made a soft sound, a gentle rumble that wasn't threatening. Act more like someone trying to speak after waking up from a long rest. She shifted slightly, and Evan noticed she moved with grace, even in her weakened state. Her mane-like crest of fur fell over her shoulders as she tried to sit up. "Careful," Evan murmured. "You were hurt. I brought you here from the crash site." The creature paused, her gaze sharpening as if trying to remember. She touched the sides of her body slowly, checking for injury. When she realized she wasn't restrained, her shoulders relaxed a little. She turned back to Evan and made a short sound, a clear, two-syllable word. "Shora." Evan felt a shiver of surprise. She wasn't growling. She was speaking. Carefully, he pointed to her, repeating the word as gently as he could. "Shara." She nodded in unmistakably human-like gesture and tapped her own chest with a graceful hand. "Shara," she said again, more firmly this time. Evan's face lit up. "That's your name," he whispered. "Shara." The creature studied him for a long moment. Then she tilted her head toward him and tapped his arm gently with the back of her knuckles, as if asking something. Her expression softened, and she made another sound, a questioning tone. "Oh my." "Name?" Evan asked. He tapped his own chest. "Evan," she repeated it slowly, sounding out each part. "Avon." She said it with a warm, smooth tone that made the name feel new again. In that moment, Evan felt a sudden sense of connection, like they had crossed the first small bridge between their worlds. Shara tried to stand, but swayed immediately. Evan reached out instinctively, catching her elbow to steady her. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned into his support for a moment, her weight surprisingly comfortable. When she realized he was helping her, she made a soft, appreciative sound, something like a gentle hum. "You need rest," he said softly. "You're still recovering." She didn't understand the words, but she understood his tone. She nodded a little and sat back down, folding her legs under her. Evan brought her the bowl of water, hoping she would recognize it. She sniffed it cautiously, then cupped her hands and drank in careful sips. When she finished, she looked at Evan again with a clear, grateful expression. For the next hour, they studied each other with quiet curiosity. Evan spoke softly, pointing to objects around the tent, trying to teach her simple English words. He pointed to himself again. "Evan." Then he pointed to her. "Shara." She repeated both smoothly. Then she touched the tent fabric and made a curious sound. Evan smiled. "Tent." She tried saying it, and though it came out more like 10. He laughed softly and nodded to encourage her. Shara seemed pleased. She tapped the desert sand under the tent floor and said a word in her own language, something melodic and smooth. Evan tried repeating it, and she gave a small nod, her eyes bright with approval, even though they couldn't fully understand each other. The communication felt natural, almost easy. But then something shifted in her expression. Shara placed her hand over her chest and spoke a short phrase, careful, steady, important. Her eyes softened in a way Evan didn't understand. She spoke the phrase again, slower, and tapped lightly on the tent floor, as if showing respect. Evan tilted his head. "What does that mean?" he asked. "Is it something important to you?" Shara nodded. She gestured between the two of them and then made the phrase again. She was trying to explain a concept, something about them together. Evan's heart thumped with curiosity. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, so he simply nodded and gave her a warm, encouraging smile. "We'll figure it out. Don't worry. We're okay." Shara watched him closely, her golden eyes gentle and wise. Then she lowered her head slightly, not in fear, but in a gesture that felt meaningful, like trust. Evan didn't know it yet, but this small motion was a sign of deep respect in her culture. As the day went on, Shara's strength returned little by little. She stretched her arms, flexed her hands, and even stood for a short moment without swaying. Evan stayed close, ready to help if she needed support. She didn't seem bothered by his presence. In fact, she seemed comforted by it. Together, they shared simple food. Evan offered her fruit and bread. She examined both carefully, sniffing them before taking small, thoughtful bites. She made a soft, pleased sound at the sweetness of the fruit, and Evan smiled without meaning to. Every time their eyes met, she held his gaze a little longer. Not in a frightening way, but in a warm, curious one. Like she was trying to understand who he was beyond the surface. In return, Evan found himself observing her with a growing sense of wonder. She moved with grace, even when tired. Her expressions were clear and gentle. Her presence filled the tent with a quiet strength, like a warm glow that made him feel strangely safe. By afternoon, she tried taking a few steps outside the tent. Evan stayed beside her, letting her lean on him when she needed balance. The desert was bright, and the wind carried soft grains of sand around them. Shara lifted her face to the breeze, closing her eyes as if greeting an old friend. For a moment, the two simply stood there. No words, no confusion. Just a shared peace in the warm sunlight. When Shara opened her eyes again, she turned to Evan and touched his shoulder gently with her hand. It wasn't a push or a pull. It was a gesture that felt soft, thoughtful, and grateful. She spoke a word that sounded like a promise, firm, calm, spirit, and filled with meaning. Evan didn't understand the word, but he felt its weight. Something important had changed between them that night. As the stars filled the dark sky, Shara stayed awake beside the tent entrance, keeping watch. Evan didn't know why she insisted on watching over him, but her presence made him feel surprisingly calm. The night was cool, but he felt warm knowing she was there. He didn't know it yet. But in Shara's culture, sharing danger, shelter, and trust created a bond stronger than anything written or spoken. A bond she believed now existed between them, something sacred. Lifelong and unbreakable, Evan slept peacefully, unaware that his simple act of kindness had already become something far deeper in Shara's heart. The desert evening softened into gentle colors, pale orange, soft pink, and deep blue blending near the horizon. Evan sat outside the tent, polishing one of his instruments, trying to act calm, even though his mind was spinning faster than the rising wind. Shara stood a few steps away, her golden fur catching the fading sunlight. She lifted her face toward the sky as if she could feel something in the air that he could not. A long, low rumble of distant thunder rolled across the desert. Storms were rare in this area, but when they came fast. Evan felt the first cool brush of air touch his arms. He looked at Shara. Even though her face was unfamiliar, he could read a quiet worry in her eyes. She pointed toward the sky with one hand, then tapped the ground with the other, speaking softly in her own language. Her tone was calm but serious. "You can sense the storm coming earlier than I can, can't you?" Evan said, even though he knew she might not understand the words. But she seemed to understand the feeling behind them. She nodded once and stepped closer to him, gently touching his elbow to guide him toward the tent. Evan smiled. All right, we'll go inside." He began gathering loose items scattered outside. Shara helped without needing instructions. She picked up the heavier pieces, moving with surprising ease now that she had regained more of her strength. The wind grew stronger, pushing sand along the ground in quick waves. Evan zipped the tent door shut just as the first gust hit with real force. The interior dimmed as the storm. Clouds darkened above them. Shara sat near the entrance, listening carefully, her ears lifting and shifting slightly with each sound. Evan had never seen someone listen with such focus. It was almost like she could read the storm through its wind. "You're not scared, are you?" Evan asked. Shara looked at him and shook her head gently. Then she pointed at him instead, raising an eyebrow. "Me?" he asked. He laughed a little. "Okay, maybe I'm a little nervous." She made a soft, warm sound, something like a gentle purr of understanding. It wasn't mocking at all. It was comforting outside. The storm thickened. The tent, shook lightly under the force of the wind. Evan checked the supports to make sure everything was stable. Shara watched him, ready to help if needed. When he sat back down, she shifted closer, not touching him, but close enough that he felt her presence like a warm fire in a cold room. For a long moment, they listened to the rhythm of the wind together. Evan cleared his throat softly. "You said something important this morning. I couldn't understand the words, but I felt like it meant something between us." Shara turned to him slowly. Her eyes softened. She spoke the word again, clear, rounded, gentle. Then she touched her chest, then his. Not in an intense way, but in a way that felt symbolic. Evan felt his breath catch. "Is that a tradition? A phrase?" he asked quietly. Shara nodded. She traced a shape in the air, 2 lines joining into one, and repeated the word in a calm, deep tone that made the air feel warm. Evan swallowed. He didn't understand the language, but he understood her sincerity. Whatever the phrase meant, it wasn't casual. It held a special meaning in her world. He nodded back slowly, wanting her to know he respected it, even if he didn't fully understand. The storm intensified. The sudden burst of wind made the tent shift. Shara reacted instantly, not with fear, but with instinct. She moved closer to Evan and gently placed a hand near his shoulder, steadying both him and herself. There was nothing aggressive in her touch. It was protective, natural, and filled with calm assurance. "It's okay," Evan said quietly, though he felt much calmer with her hand nearby. "We just have to wait it out." The minutes passed slowly. Every now and then, Shara glanced at him as if checking to make sure he was fine. Each time he gave her a small nod, and each time she relaxed slightly. At last, the wind began to settle. The tent stopped shaking, and the soft patter of sand against the fabric faded. Evan exhaled deeply in relief. "We made it." Shara pushed open a small corner of the tent door and peered outside. The desert looked fresh and cool, the air washed clean by the storm. 2 moons, one small, one larger, shone softly overhead, breaking through the last thin clouds. Their glow painted the sand in silver and white. Evan followed her outside. The world felt peaceful, almost magical. The sky sparkled with stars that seemed sharper after the storm. Shara stepped barefoot onto the sand, letting it sink between her toes. She lifted her head, breathing in the calm, cool air. The moons reflected in her eyes, turning the amber into shimmering gold. Evan stood beside her, captivated by the quiet beauty of the moment. Shara looked at him and pointed to the moon, speaking softly. Her voice carried a gentle rhythm, as if she were reciting something important from her culture, perhaps a story, or belief, or a tradition linked to the moons. Evan listened carefully. "Are the moons special to you?" he asked softly. She nodded. Then she gently traced a circle in the air and placed her hand over her chest. Her voice grew soft and earnest as she repeated the same important word from earlier. Evan didn't know the meaning, but he felt the weight of it. The night felt too gentle, too perfect for it to be casual. "What does it mean, Shara?" he whispered. "Between you and me? What does it mean?" She stepped a little closer, enough that her presence warmed the cool desert air. She pointed to him, then to herself, and repeated the phrase again, slower and deeper. Then she added another short line, something like a vow. Her hand rested gently over her own heart. Evan suddenly understood not the exact words, but the intention. She was explaining her culture's bond. A connection formed through trust, protection, and shared danger. A bond she believed now existed between them because he saved her and shared shelter with her. "Is this your way of saying we're connected?" Evan asked softly. Shara nodded. Not forcefully. Not in a way that claimed him, but in a way that shared truth with a calm, respectful heart. Evan let the meaning settle inside him. He didn't feel afraid. He didn't feel pressured. Instead, he felt a warm, surprising peace, like he had finally met someone who saw him clearly. He sat down on the sand. Shara followed and sat near him, leaving a small but comfortable distance. The 2 moons shone above them like gentle lanterns. For the next hour, They talked not with full sentences, but through gestures, soft words, and quiet understanding. Evan pointed at stars and told their names. Shara listened with bright eyes. She shared small words from her language, teaching him how to shape them with his mouth. He tried, clumsy at first, but she smiled warmly each time he improved. He laughed once when he mispronounced something so badly that it became a different word entirely. Shara giggled softly, a pleasant musical sound that made him smile even more. The night grew cooler. Shara gently brushed sand away from her wristband, tapping a few buttons that glowed softly. A small holographic image flickered above it for a few seconds, too small and unclear for Evan to understand. But Shara stared at it with a quiet mixture of longing and determination. "It's your people, isn't it?" Evan whispered. She looked at him and nodded once. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. "We'll find them. I'll help however I can." Shara's eyes softened again. She placed her hand gently on the sand between them, palm open. A peaceful gesture. A trusting gesture. Evan hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed his hand lightly over hers, not gripping, not holding. Just a soft touch, sharing warmth in the moonlight. Shara closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply, as if sealing a quiet promise. The desert around them was silent, but the silence felt alive with meaning. Evan didn't fully understand the bond Shara believed in, but he understood one thing very clearly. She trusted him, deeply and completely. And sitting under the soft glow of 2 moons, Evan realized he trusted her too. Morning light warmed the desert slowly, turning the sand into shades of gold and soft brown. Evan woke before Shara did, which surprised him because she always seemed alert to every sound. She lay peacefully beside the entrance of the tent, her mane-like crest spread softly across her shoulders. Her breathing was even and calm. After spending several nights together during storms and quiet evenings, Evan had grown used to her presence. The tent felt oddly empty during moments when she wasn't awake or moving. He stepped outside to stretch and look for signs of weather changes. The sky was clear today, bright and endless. Not a single cloud drifted above them. The storm from the night before had left the air smelling fresh. Almost sweet, Evan looked back at the tent, watching Shara sleep for a moment. Her fur shimmered faintly in the sunlight, giving her a gentle glow. It amazed him how natural it now felt to wake up with a being from another world beside him. He didn't understand everything about her culture or her beliefs, but he understood her heart, calm, kind, and loyal. Soon, Shara stirred. Her ears twitched softly, and she opened her amber eyes with a slow blink. When she saw Evan outside, she pushed herself up with graceful movements, stretching in a way that made her look both powerful and peaceful at the same time. She stepped outside and greeted him with a quiet, warm sound. "Good morning," Evan said with a smile. Shara repeated the word morning with careful pronunciation, and Evan laughed softly. Her voice always carried a gentle tone when she tried human words, as if she enjoyed learning them. After they shared breakfast fruit for Shara and bread with dried nuts for Evan, they turned their attention toward a larger goal. For days, Shara's wristband had been blinking softly, reacting to something unseen. Evan suspected it was trying to connect with her people, and today the blinking seemed stronger. Evan pointed at the blinking band. "Your people. Maybe they're close?" Shara looked down at her wristband, touched a few glowing points, and a faint shape appeared above it like a map or signal. It wasn't entirely clear, but she understood it enough to react. Her expression changed into something thoughtful and determined. She pointed to the horizon, then to the wristband, then to herself. "You think they're coming?" Evan interpreted softly. Shara nodded with a small smile, though the smile carried something gentle but heavy, like a mix of happiness and worry. Evan felt something similar in his own chest. If her people were coming, that meant Shara might leave soon. He felt a strange ache inside at the thought. He didn't want her to go, even though he knew it was natural. Shara noticed the slight change in his expression. Her ears lowered a little and she stepped closer, touching her fingertips lightly to his arm. She spoke a few soft words in her language. Evan didn't understand them, but he understood her tone. It was warm, comforting, reassuring. "I'll be okay," Evan said quietly. Though he wasn't sure if he really meant it, Shara tilted her head and studied his face carefully, as if trying to read the meaning behind his eyes. She then traced the same symbol in the air, 2 lines joining into one, spoke the word that held special meaning in her culture. She spoke it gently and slowly, making sure he heard every sound. Evan swallowed. He still didn't know the exact meaning, but he knew it wasn't about leaving. It was about staying connected, about trust, about a bond she believed they shared. Later in the day, they walked together to check the crash site again. The metal pod still sat half buried in the sand, silent and cool now. The strange symbols on its sides no longer glowed. Evan noticed new marks around it, footprints from desert animals passing by during the night. Nothing dangerous, just curious creatures exploring. Shara knelt beside her pod and placed one hand on its surface. Her expression softened with memory. She tapped the metal lightly, and a soft hum responded, faint but present. She pressed her wristband against it, letting the 2 devices communicate. A few glowing points flickered on the surface of the pod before dimming again. Evan stayed beside her, giving her space, but ready if she needed anything. He watched her expression, wondering what memories she held, what she missed about her home. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want to make her sad. Instead, he simply waited. After a few quiet minutes, Shara stood and turned to him. She gestured in a slow, thoughtful way, pointing at the sky, then at him, then at herself. She spoke carefully, her voice soft. "You and me," Evan interpreted. "Something. Together?" She nodded and repeated the important phrase again, then touched her own heart. Evan couldn't help smiling softly. "I don't know exactly what that means," he admitted, "but I feel it." "I feel something too." Shara's eyes brightened. She didn't need words to show her gratitude. She moved closer and pressed her forehead lightly to his shoulder, just for a moment. It was a gesture similar to the ones she had done before, but this one felt fuller. It's more meaningful. As they walked back toward the tent, the air shifted subtly. A faint vibration trembled under their feet, not a dangerous one, just a gentle thrum that seemed to come from the sky. Shara stopped immediately. Her ears lifted. Her eyes widened with recognition. Evan felt his heart skip. "Is that your people?" Shara nodded slowly, her eyes shining but calm. The vibration grew steady, warm, and rhythmic, like a distant heartbeat echoing through the air. Evan looked up. The horizon shimmered, and for a moment he thought the heat waves were playing tricks on him. But then he saw it clearly. A soft light forming far away, moving gracefully closer. Shara stepped beside him, her expression serene. She touched Evan's arm gently, reassuring him that everything was okay. He nodded. "I'm here. I'm with you." The light grew closer, but not fast. It floated slowly, gracefully, like a drifting lantern. When it reached the sky above them, it dimmed slightly, resting in place high above the ground. Evan didn't see any sharp edges or loud machines, just a gentle, glowing craft that looked peaceful and quiet. Shara lifted her wristband, and the lights on it glowed brighter. The craft responded with a warm tone that filled the desert with a calming vibration. Evan felt something inside him twist gently, something like sadness mixed with hope. He knew Shara needed to go home. He knew this moment was important for her. But he also knew he didn't want their time to end here. Shara stepped closer to him, her eyes soft and deep. She pressed her hand over her heart again and spoke the important phrase one more time, slowly and lovingly. Then she touched his chest with the same gentle motion. Connecting the gesture, Evan placed his hand over hers, not to stop her, but to show he understood. "Shara," he whispered, "I'm grateful for everything." She smiled, one of her warm, glowing smiles that always made him feel peaceful. Then something unexpected happened. Shara reached for his hand carefully and guided it upward with her palm, motioning gently toward the glowing craft above them. She looked into his eyes and gave a small nod. Evan froze. "Are you saying you want me to come with you?" Shara nodded again, this time more firmly. She spoke a short, hopeful phrase in her language, her voice soft but filled with meaning. Her expression held no pressure, no demand, only an offer. a promise of companionship and trust. Evan felt his breath catch. He looked at the glowing craft, at Shara, at the desert that had been his work and his home for so long. For the first time, he realized how quiet and lonely his life had been before she crashed into it. He looked at her again. Her warm eyes waited patiently. He smiled slowly, his chest full of calm certainty. "I'll go," he whispered. Shara's eyes brightened with a gentle joy. Together, they walked toward the soft beam of light that descended from the craft, glowing like a calm sunrise. Evan wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because he wasn't walking into an unknown future alone. He was walking beside Sharu, someone he trusted, someone he cared for, someone who believed their bond was meant to last. And Evan believed it too. When the first light of morning touched the desert, Evan stood beside Shara and watched the sky slowly change colors. The cool air carried a quiet calm, but inside his heart, everything felt unsettled. He knew this might be the last time he stood on Earth with her. It was a strange thought, almost unbelievable. Only days ago, he had been just a lonely geologist walking the dunes to collect samples. Now he was preparing to meet an entire group of beings from another world, beings who considered him, connected to one of their own in a way he barely understood. Shara sensed his uneasiness even before he spoke. She stepped closer, her golden fur shining softly in the rising sun. "You are worried," she said gently. Her voice still carried the deep, warm tone of her species. But Evan had learned to hear the softness behind it. "I don't know what will happen next," he admitted. He tried to keep his voice calm, but the truth slipped through. "Your people. What if they don't want me around?" Shara considered his words carefully. She had taken the time to understand human emotions, even if some of them were still strange to her. "My people value trust," she said. "They value choices made with honesty and courage. You have shown both." She paused, then added, "I will speak for you, and I will stand with you." Her confidence helped, but Evan still felt the pressure of the unknown. From the moment she told him about her culture's bonding tradition, part of him had believed it was temporary. Maybe she would return home healed, thank him for helping her, and move on with her life. But Shara had made it clear that their connection meant something permanent for her. She did not use the word lightly. Before he could answer, Shara tilted her head upward. Her ears lifted slightly, a sign he had learned meant she was listening to something far away. "They are near," she said quietly. "My people." Evan followed her gaze. At first, he saw nothing but sky. Then a shimmering shape appeared high above, like a bright star that grew larger and clearer by the second. It moved smoothly, without sound, glowing softly like polished metal catching sunlight. As it descended, the air around them shifted gently, as if welcoming something graceful rather than heavy. Evan held his breath. He had never imagined he would see a spacecraft in real life, especially not one belonging to a species he had met. Face dash to dash face dot. The ship hovered a short distance away and slowly settled on the sand. Its surface seemed alive with moving patterns, almost like waves shifting under glass. A small opening appeared and a soft ramp extended toward the ground. Evan felt his heartbeat quicken. Shara stood tall beside him, her posture calm and steady. "Remember," she said softly, "stay close to me. My presence will show them that you are under my trust." He nodded, and they began to walk toward the ship. The sand sank softly under their feet, and for a moment he felt as if he were walking into a dream. Inside the opening stood 3 figures, members of Shara's species. They were slightly taller than she was, their fur different shades of bronze and silver. Their eyes were bright and observant, and each carried an air of quiet authority. Evan felt a mix of awe and nervousness. But he reminded himself that Shara had trusted him, protected him, and shared her world with him. He owed her the same steadiness. One of the aliens stepped forward. His voice was calm and respectful. "Shara of the Caval Pride," he said, "we received your signal. We came as fast as possible." His gaze shifted to Evan, studying him without judgment, only curiosity. Shara spoke proudly. "This human, Evan Hale, aided me when I was alone and injured. Without him, I would not be standing here. I declare him under my life bond." Evan swallowed hard. Hearing her say it out loud in front of her own people made it sound even more real. The three aliens exchanged glances. This clearly meant something significant to them. The one who had spoken first stepped closer to Evan and looked him directly in the eyes. There was no hostility, only a deep seriousness. "You understand the meaning of what she claims?" he asked gently. "Among our kind, such a bond is not casual. It is a path walked by two lives together." Evan hesitated, not because he doubted her, but because he wanted to choose his words with care. "I understand that it matters," he said. "And I know I didn't just help her because she needed help. I stayed because I didn't want to leave her. Not then, and not now." Shara watched him with a calm but warm expression. It was clear his words meant something to her. The silver-furred alien nodded slowly. "Then the choice becomes yours," he said. "You may stay with Shara, under her guidance, and become part of our pride's journey. Or you may remain on your world. She will honor either path." Evan looked around at the ship, at the glowing interior, at the beings who seemed both powerful and peaceful. Then he looked at Shara. She had become a part of his daily thoughts without him realizing it. She had shared stories of stars he had never seen, of landscapes beyond imagination, of people who valued loyalty above all else. Earth suddenly felt small, not unimportant, but different. He had spent so much of his life working alone, traveling to remote places, chasing curiosity that never quite filled the gaps in his heart. But with Shara, things felt new, bigger, worth exploring. "Shara," he said softly, "I want to go with you." Her eyes brightened in a way he had come to recognize, relief mixed with joy. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and steady. "Then our paths join," she said. The other aliens stepped aside, making space for them to enter the ship. Evan followed Shara up the ramp, feeling the smooth, cool surface under his feet. Inside, the air felt different, slightly sweeter, filled with a soft humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Everything glowed in soothing tones of gold and blue, as if designed to calm both mind and senses. Shara guided him through the walkway. "This ship will take us to my home world," she said, "but you are not expected to change who you are. You will learn, and we will learn with you." Evan smiled. "I think I'll have a lot of questions. I will answer them all," she promised. They reached a circular room with large windows that looked out into the sky. The desert stretched endlessly below them. Evan felt a small pull in his chest, knowing he was leaving it behind. But he also felt a rising excitement, something he hadn't felt in years. Shara stood beside him as the ship gently began to rise. The ground drifted farther away, and the horizon stretched wide like a painting unfolding into the distance. Evan watched until the desert became a pattern of gold and shadow. As the ship climbed higher, the sky deepened into a rich blue. Then, slowly, stars began to appear. Daylight stars, bright and sharp. Evan realized this was only the beginning. There would be more wonders ahead, more surprises, more challenges, and more moments shared with the strange, honorable, gentle being who had entered his life by accident. Shara looked at him with steady eyes. "This journey will change us," she said. "But we walk it together." Evan nodded. He felt peace settle inside him, a quiet certainty he hadn't felt in a long time. The ship rose beyond the clouds, into the vast open space waiting above, and so began a new chapter I formed through trust, courage, and a bond neither human nor alien had expected, yet both welcomed with open hearts.